She collapsed on the staircase, and in panic, her daughter dialed the wrong number only to reach the billionaire CEO who had abandoned them. "You're my father." Lumi's voice trembled, her 12-year-old mind connecting dots that should have been impossible. Yes, the billionaire's single word carried the weight of 12 missing years. "Where have you been all my life?" Her question hung in the sterile hospital air. Inside the room, Iris's heart monitor spiked as she clutched the thin blanket. "James is here." "In the hospital?" The color drained from her face as she whispered, "I never wanted you to find out this way." Back in the hallway, James Thorne, CEO of a tech empire worth billions, stood powerless before the child he never knew existed. "That I thought she didn't want to be found," he said softly. "I never knew about you." Lumi's eyes, startlingly like his own, narrowed with the calculation of someone whose trust couldn't be easily earned. "You didn't know. Or you didn't care enough to look." The universe has a cruel sense of humor. One wrong number in a moment of panic had reconnected 3 lives broken by secrets, pride, and the manipulation of a powerful family that would stop at nothing to keep them apart. Have you ever wondered what would happen if the most desperate moment of your life accidentally connected you with the very person you've been avoiding for years? If you've ever felt the universe has a strange way of bringing people back together when you least expect it, tap that like button right now. And if you believe some connections are meant to withstand even time and betrayal, subscribe to Mr. Arden's Heart Stories, where we explore the complex threads that bind our hearts together. Today's story is about how one mother's collapse led to a wrong number that changed 3 lives forever. It's about second chances, the price of pride, and the ways love can survive even the most determined efforts to destroy it. By the end of this video, you'll understand how sometimes our greatest mistakes can lead to unexpected redemption and why the universe might have its own timeline for healing what's broken. The moment Iris Marquez collapsed on the mahogany staircase of their rented Victorian, the universe shifted on its axis. The sound of her body hitting the wood echoed through the high ceilings like a gunshot, followed by an eerie silence that lasted precisely 3 seconds before 12-year-old Lumi's scream pierced the quiet Sunday afternoon. "Mom! Mom!" Lumi raced down the stairs, her science textbook abandoned on her bed, her mind already calculating possibilities of stroke, heart attack, aneurysm as she reached her mother's crumpled form. Iris was breathing but unresponsive, her normally warm brown skin ashen, her thick black curls splayed across the step. "Help," Iris mumbled, her words slurred and distant. "Hospital." Lumi grabbed her mother's phone from where it had clattered to the floor. Her hands trembled as she tried to unlock it, the numbers blurring through her tears. 3 failed attempts and the phone locked completely. She reached for the landline on the hallway table, the ancient relic they kept just in case, and punched in what she thought was 911, her fingers skittering across unfamiliar buttons. The call connected, but instead of a dispatcher's practiced calm, a man's voice answered, deep and vaguely irritated. "James Thorne. I need an ambulance. My mom fell and she couldn't get up and something's wrong with her face." "And slow down," the voice commanded, shifting instantly from annoyed to alert. "Who is this?" "Lumi. Lumi Marquez. My mother collapsed and I need help. Please send someone." A pause. Brief but heavy. "Lumi." The way he said her name with recognition, with reverence registered somewhere in her panic-stricken mind. "How did you get this number?" the man asked, his tone now strangely gentle. "I was trying to call 911. Lumi screamed, watching her mother's eyelids flutter. "Please, she needs help. What's your address?" She rattled off their address on Wisteria Lane, the old Victorian they'd moved into 6 months ago when they couldn't afford their downtown apartment anymore. "Stay on the line. I'm calling emergency services from another phone right now," he said, and she heard muffled commands being issued to someone else. "Tell me what happened." As Lumi described her mother's collapse, the stranger asked precise, clinical questions about Iris's symptoms. Was she conscious? Breathing normally? Any medication allergies? Any history of seizures or heart problems? 5 minutes later, sirens wailed in the distance. "They're almost there," the man said. "I'll meet you at Mercy General." Don't worry about anything else right now. Who are you? Lumi demanded, suddenly aware that a complete stranger was inserting himself into their emergency. The line went silent for a moment. An old friend of your mother's. I'm coming to help. As paramedics burst through their front door, Lumi clutched the phone like a lifeline. Wait, what's your name? James. James Thorne. The name meant nothing to her. Not yet. Lumi watched as the paramedics worked with practiced efficiency. The female EMT spoke to her mother in a clear, calm voice while her partner checked vital signs. Pupils equal and reactive, the male paramedic announced. BP is 90/60ths. Heart rate elevated at 110. Ma'am, can you tell me your name? The female paramedic asked. Iris, her mother whispered. Marquez. Good, that's good. Do you know what day it is? Sunday. Lumi's science project. She's oriented but weak, the EMT said to her partner. Let's get her stabilized for transport. Lumi stood to the side, arms wrapped tightly around herself, feeling smaller and more helpless than she ever had before. In their little family of two, her mother had always been the unshakable foundation. Seeing her this vulnerable was terrifying. Are you her daughter? The female paramedic asked, noticing Lumi's distress. She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. You did great calling for help. Your mom's going to be okay, but we need to take her to the hospital to check her out. Can you call someone to meet you there? Another family member? Lumi shook her head. It's just us. Then she remembered the man on the phone. But someone's meeting us there. A friend of my mom's. The paramedics exchanged a glance. The woman placed a gentle hand on Lumi's shoulder. I'll ride with you in the ambulance, she said. Let's grab your mom's purse and anything else you might need. 15 minutes later, Lumi sat in the back of the ambulance, watching as the EMTs attached monitors to her mother. Iris drifted in and out of consciousness, each time searching for Lumi before relaxing back into the stretcher. Stay with me, baby, Iris murmured during one of her lucid moments. Don't leave me. I'm right here, Mom, Lumi promised, her voice steadier than she felt. I'm not going anywhere. As the ambulance wove through Sunday afternoon traffic, its sirens clearing a path to Mercy General Hospital, Lumi wondered about the stranger who'd answered her call. James Thorne. The way he'd said her name with that momentary shock of recognition played in her mind like a skipping record. Who was he? How did he know her mother? And why had he sounded so affected? The emergency room buzzed with controlled chaos as Lumi huddled in a plastic chair, her mother's worn leather purse clutched against her chest. The doctors had taken Iris immediately, leaving Lumi with forms she couldn't complete and questions she couldn't answer. At 12, she was adept at caring for herself while Iris worked double shifts, but this medical histories and insurance details was beyond her expertise. Are you Lumi? She looked up to find a tall man in a charcoal suit standing before her, his presence somehow calming the frenetic energy of the waiting room. Everything about him spoke of power and precision, his closely cropped dark hair peppered with distinguished silver, the impeccable cut of his clothes, the way hospital staff straightened as he walked past. Only his eyes, startlingly blue and rimmed with worry, betrayed any emotion. You're him, she said. The wrong number. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. James Thorne. He extended his hand formally, as though she were an adult. I spoke with the attending physician. Your mother had a severe hypoglycemic episode combined with exhaustion. They're running tests, but she's conscious now. Relief washed over Lumi, quickly followed by suspicion. How did you get them to tell you anything? They wouldn't tell me, and I'm her daughter. James settled into the chair beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. I have some influence here. What does that mean? I'm on the hospital's board of directors. Lumi narrowed her eyes, taking in his expensive watch and the subtle logo on his silk tie. You're rich. Yes. And you know my mom? Something flickered across his face, pain, perhaps, or regret. I did, a long time ago. Before Lumi could interrogate him further, a nurse appeared. Miss Marquez. Your mother's asking for you. Lumi stood, clutching the purse tighter. James remained seated. You're not coming? She asked. He shook his head. She doesn't know I'm here. It's better if you see her first. Confusion clouded Lumi's features, but the need to see her mother overrode her curiosity about this strange man and his connection to Iris. Iris Marquez lay against sterile white pillows, and dripping clear fluid into her arm, her normally vibrant presence diminished by the institutional surroundings. At 38, she was still beautiful, with high cheekbones and expressive eyes that could communicate volumes without words. Those eyes widened at the sight of her daughter. Lumi, thank God you're okay, she whispered, reaching out. Lumi rushed to her side. Me? You're the one in the hospital. Iris smiled weakly. I meant thank God you knew what to do. The doctor said you saved me by getting help so quickly. I tried to call 911, Lumi explained, but I dialed wrong on the landline. Some man answered instead. He helped me anyway. Iris froze. What man? What number did you call? I don't know. I was panicking. Lumi shrugged. He said his name is James Thorne. The color drained from Iris's face, leaving her paler than when she'd collapsed. The monitors beside her bed registered a spike in her heart rate. Mom. What's wrong? Iris closed her eyes, her chest rising and falling rapidly as she fought for control. James is here. In the hospital. He's in the waiting room. He said he knows you from a long time ago. How do you know him? A nurse bustled in, alerted by the change in vital signs. Ms. Marquez, you need to stay calm. Your body's been through a significant shock. I'm fine, Iris insisted, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her. Just surprised. After checking her vitals and adjusting the nurse left them alone again. Mom, Lumi pressed, who is he? Iris's fingers twisted the thin hospital blanket. Someone I used to love. Someone who left. Lumi's analytical mind connected the dots with terrifying speed. Is he my father? The silence that followed was answer enough. If you've ever had a moment where everything you thought you knew about your life suddenly changed, hit that like button now. That feeling of the ground shifting beneath your feet, of discovering that the story you've been told isn't the whole truth, is exactly what young Lumi is experiencing right now. James Thorne waited in the stark hospital corridor, his composed exterior masking the storm within. For 12 years, he had imagined this moment, seeing Iris again, explaining what had happened, asking for forgiveness. But not like this. Not with her collapsed in a hospital bed and him ambushing her during a medical crisis. The door to Iris's room opened, and Lumi emerged. Her eyes, so like his own, were sharp with new knowledge. She wants to see you, the girl said, her voice carefully neutral. She also said to tell you that if you upset her, the nurses will throw you out. A genuine smile crossed his face. That sounds like your mother. You're my father. It wasn't a question, but he answered anyway. Yes, where have you been all my life? The simplicity of the question belied its devastating weight. That's complicated. I'm gifted. Try me. Another smile, this one tinged with pride and regret. Your mother never told me she was pregnant. I never knew you existed until today. Lumi's expression remained skeptical. And you didn't look for her all this time? I thought she didn't want to be found. That he nodded toward the hospital room. We should continue this conversation with your mother. Iris was sitting up when they entered, her posture rigid with tension. 12 years had changed her fine lines at the corners of her eyes, a new guardedness in her expression, but to James, she was still the woman who had owned his heart from the moment they'd met. Iris, he said, her name a prayer on his lips. James. Her voice was cool, controlled. You look well. Success agrees with you. You're still beautiful, he replied, unable to stop the words. Lumi glanced between them, sensing currents of emotion too complex for even her precocious understanding. I should have called first, James continued. But when I heard Lumi's voice, when I realized who she must be, you had no right to come here, Iris interrupted. No right to insert yourself into our lives after all this time. I'm aware of that. But she called me, Iris. By complete chance, she called me when you needed help. What was I supposed to do? Ignore that? Iris closed her eyes briefly. The universe has a cruel sense of humor. Lumi, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. I deserve to know what happened between you two. Both adults turned to her, startled by the authority in her young voice. She's right, James said after a moment. She deserves the truth. Fine, Iris conceded. But the condensed version. I'm too exhausted for the full drama right now. James pulled a chair closer to the bed, maintaining a respectful distance. 12 years ago, I was working as a technology consultant at Meridian Solutions, where your mother was head of their graphic design department. We were assigned to the same project team. He's simplifying, Iris cut in. James wasn't just any consultant. He was developing the algorithm that eventually became Thornteca's flagship product. The one that made him a billionaire. Lumi's eyes widened. A billionaire? Like, with a B? James nodded, uncomfortable with the focus on his wealth. The point is, we fell in love. Quickly, completely. But we came from different worlds. I was raised with privilege, Iris grew up working class. My family, especially my father, didn't approve. Didn't approve is putting it mildly, Iris scoffed. Your father offered me money to leave you alone. Shock registered on James's face. That he did what? You didn't know. Iris studied him, seeing genuine surprise. He called me to his office, wrote out a check for $250,000, and said it was compensation for my time. Iris, I swear I had no idea. The anguish in his voice was unmistakable. What did you do? I tore up the check in his face and walked out. A shadow crossed her features. But he was right about one thing, we were from different worlds. When you left for Singapore to finalize the venture capital deal, you were supposed to join me once I settled the contracts, James finished. I sent you the ticket. When you didn't come, when all my calls went unanswered, I thought you decided I wasn't worth the complications. Lumi, following the conversation like a tennis match, interjected. Wait, what ticket? What calls? Iris looked down at her hands. I never received any tickets. Any calls, understanding dawned on James's face. My father. He intercepted everything. And you never came back to check, Iris said, her voice hollow. You never showed up at my door demanding answers. I did, he countered, leaning forward. 3 months later, I flew back specifically to find you. You'd left Meridian. Your apartment was rented to someone else. Your phone was disconnected. I tried finding you through mutual friends, but no one knew where you'd gone. It was like you'd vanished. Because your father's private investigator was following me, Iris revealed. I caught him taking photos of me outside my doctor's office where I just confirmed my pregnancy. I panicked, changed my number, and moved to a different neighborhood. I was scared, James. I was carrying your child, and it felt like your family was hunting me. The room fell silent as the pieces of their shattered past aligned into a pattern that finally made sense. I should have tried harder, James admitted, his voice thick with regret. I let my pride and my hurt stop me from finding you. And I should have trusted you more, Iris countered. I should have found a way to tell you about Lumi. The beeping of monitors and distant hospital announcements filled the heavy silence that followed. So, Lumi said finally, you both made mistakes. Big ones. But now we're here, and I exist, and maybe we need to figure out what happens next. James and Iris exchanged a look of equal parts wonder and wariness at their daughter's maturity. "What happens next," Iris said firmly, "is I get out of this hospital and back to work. We have bills to pay." James shifted uncomfortably. "Iris, if you're struggling financially, don't," she cut him off. "We've managed for 12 years without your money. We'll continue managing. But if it's affecting your health, the doctor said I collapsed from hypoglycemia and exhaustion. I skipped meals because I was rushing between jobs, and I haven't been sleeping well because of deadline stress. It's temporary." "You're working 2 jobs?" James asked, concern evident. "Freelance design during the day, bartending 4 nights a week," Iris admitted. "The Victorian costs more to heat than our old apartment, but Lumi needed a better school district." Lumi, who had been quietly processing this adult conversation, suddenly sat straighter. "Mom, I could have stayed at my old school. You didn't have to work so hard just for me." Iris reached for her daughter's hand. "Your education is everything, Lumi. Your brilliance deserves nurturing." "And that's exactly why you should let me help," James interjected. "Not because I'm trying to buy my way into your lives, but because it's my responsibility as Lumi's father." Iris's expression hardened. "We need to discuss this later, when I'm not attached to hospital machines and Lumi isn't exhausted from a family emergency." Understanding that he'd pushed too far, James nodded and stood. "You're right. Rest now. But please, at least let me handle the hospital bills. Consider it repayment for 12 years of missed child support." When he'd gone, promising to return the next day, Lumi crawled carefully onto the hospital bed beside her mother. "He seems okay," she ventured. "For a billionaire who didn't know I existed until today." Iris stroked her daughter's hair, so similar to James's in its texture and stubborn cowlick. "He was a good man when I knew him. Brilliant, kind, driven. But people change in 12 years. You didn't," Lumi pointed out. "You're still the same mom who reads me astronomy books and dances in the kitchen and fights for me against everyone." Tears welled in Iris's eyes. "Oh, honey. I've changed more than you know. Are you going to let him help us?" Iris sighed, the weight of a decade's struggle evident in the sound. "I don't know. Pride is expensive, and I'm so tired of being broke." "And scared?" Lumi prompted, wise beyond her years. "Yes," Iris admitted. "And scared. If you've ever had to swallow your pride to do what's best for your family, comment pride versus necessity below. Sometimes the hardest decisions are between our principles and our practical needs. And if you know what it's like to face a past you thought was long buried, hit that like button right now." 3 days after her collapse, Iris was released from the hospital with ICT orders to rest and improve her nutrition. The doctors had diagnosed severe exhaustion compounded by hypoglycemia as a result of skipping meals while racing between her design clients and evening bartending shifts. James had kept a respectful distance after their initial confrontation, but his influence was evident everywhere. The private room Iris had been moved to due to availability, the specialist who happened to be passing by for a consultation, the administrative staff who assured her that everything has been taken care of when she anxiously asked about insurance coverage. Lumi sat in the passenger seat of her mother's ancient Honda as they drove home. The car's familiar rattles a strange comfort after days of hospital sterility. "He paid for everything, didn't he?" she asked, breaking the comfortable silence. Iris's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Yes. Are you mad?" Iris searched for the right word. "Conflicted. I don't want to need his help." "But we do need help," Lumi pointed out with her characteristic bluntness. "The hospital bill would have been more than we make in months." Iris glanced at her daughter, struck by how adult she sometimes seemed, a necessary side effect of their circumstances. Lumi had grown up watching her mother stretch every dollar, negotiate with bill collectors, and work herself to exhaustion. She understood financial reality in ways most 12-year-olds didn't. "When did you get so pragmatic?" Iris asked with a small smile. Around the same time I started doing the grocery math in my head to make sure we stayed under budget, Lumi replied. I'm just saying, if he wants to help and can afford it, maybe it's okay to let him. Just until we're back on our feet. The back on our feet part was a fiction. They both maintained. The truth was, they had never been financially secure. Iris had raised Lumi on a patchwork of freelance design jobs, service industry work, and occasional help from friends. They'd moved 6 times in 12 years, always chasing better school districts or more affordable rent, never quite finding both. We'll see, Iris said, non-committal. First, I need to get back to work. The doctor said you need to rest for at least a week. The doctor doesn't understand single motherhood economics. As they pulled into the driveway of their rented Victorian, Iris's stomach dropped. A sleek black SUV was parked at the curb, and James Thorne stood on their porch, arms laden with grocery bags. Seriously, Iris muttered. That he's persistent, Lumi observed, a note of approval in her voice. Iris took a deep breath, reminding herself that her daughter deserved the chance to know her father, regardless of her own complicated feelings. Let's hear him out. James straightened as they approached, his expression a careful mixture of concern and restraint. Before you say anything, he began, these aren't just groceries. The bag on the left has all the paperwork from the hospital, copies of the bills I covered, and documentation of a health trust I've established for both of you. Everything transparent, everything above board. Iris blinked, caught off guard by his directness. May I come in? He asked. These are getting heavy. Lumi unlocked the front door without waiting for her mother's response. Our kitchen's this way, she said, leading James inside. The contrast between James Thorne and their modest home was jarring. His tailored clothes and polished presence seemed to make the peeling wallpaper and worn furniture more obvious, like a spotlight on their financial struggles. Iris followed them into the kitchen, watching as James efficiently unpacked groceries, not extravagant items, but good quality staples and fresh produce that had become luxuries in their budget. The doctor said you need to focus on protein and complex carbohydrates, he explained, arranging items in their nearly empty refrigerator. There's a meal delivery service starting tomorrow again, nothing fancy, just balanced nutrition until you're back on your feet, Iris began. And I took the liberty of contacting your design clients, he continued, not meeting her eyes. I explained the medical situation and negotiated extensions on all your current projects. No one was difficult about it, especially when I mentioned covering rush fees if needed. You had no right. I also found a temporary replacement for your bartending shifts. A friend of mine owns the restaurant group that manages filigrees. The replacement is experienced and will hold your position until you're cleared to return. Stop. Iris's voice cut through his efficient recitation. You can't just waltz back into my life and take over. James finally looked at her, his expression unguarded for the first time. I'm not trying to take over, Iris. I'm trying to help. By controlling everything. By making decisions about my work, my health, my life without even asking me. The familiar anger was rising, the same fury she'd felt 12 years ago when his father had tried to buy her off, when she'd realized how easily the wealthy believed they could arrange other people's lives. Mom, Lumi interjected quietly, he's just trying to help. No, she's right, James said, holding up a hand. I overstepped. It's a habit of seeing problems and fixing them without always considering how the solutions might feel to others. He turned to Iris. I apologize. Genuinely. I should have asked first. The simple acknowledgement deflated some of Iris's anger. In their brief time together years ago, James had been many things: brilliant, passionate, occasionally naive about his privilege but never dismissive of her feelings. I appreciate the groceries, she conceded after a moment. And the hospital bills. But my work is my domain. I need to handle it myself. Understood, James said, stepping back from the refrigerator. Though the extensions have already been granted. Would you prefer I call everyone back and tell them to disregard? Iris closed her eyes briefly. The extensions would give her breathing room she desperately needed. No. That can stand. But in the future, ask first. I promise. He glanced around their kitchen, taking in the aging appliances and worn countertops. May I ask a personal question? You can ask, she replied cautiously. Are you renting or buying this house? Renting. Why? It has good bones, but it needs work. Especially before winter, these old Victorians lose heat through the original windows and attic spaces. Lumi, who had been quietly unpacking groceries, perked up. We nearly froze last winter. Mom had to tape plastic over all the windows, and we still kept the thermostat at 62 to save on heating bills. James's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. That's what I suspected. The Victorian my mother grew up in had the same issues. We manage, Iris said, uncomfortable with his scrutiny of their living conditions. I'm sure you do. His tone was careful, neutral. But as Lumi's father, I'd like to at least make sure her home is properly weatherized before winter. No strings attached. Iris started to object, but Lumi spoke first. Mom, please, she said quietly. I hated seeing you so worried about the heating bills last year. You wore your coat inside when you thought I wasn't looking. The simple observation cut through Iris's defenses. She had done everything possible to shield Lumi from their financial struggles, but children saw more than adults gave them credit for. Just weatherizing, Iris conceded reluctantly. Nothing fancy. Nothing that would make the landlord raise our rent. I'll have a contractor come by next week to assess what's needed, James said, careful not to show too much victory in his expression. As he gathered the empty grocery bags, preparing to leave, he paused. Lumi mentioned she's in the gifted program at school, he said, glancing at their daughter who was now organizing the pantry with scientific precision. I'd like to learn more about her interests, her education. When you're feeling better, of course. She's brilliant, Iris said, unable to keep the pride from her voice. Especially with mathematics and computer science. She taught herself Python when she was 10. 9.5, Lumi corrected from inside the pantry. A ghost of a smile touched James's lips. I'd like to see some of her work sometime. If that's okay with both of you. I built an app that helps Mom track her freelance hours, Lumi offered, emerging with perfectly aligned canned goods. I could show you. I'd like that very much. James's expression softened as he looked at his daughter, their daughter, and for a moment, Iris caught a glimpse of the man she'd fallen for all those years ago. Beneath the polished corporate exterior, his fundamental decency remained intact. I should go, he said, checking his watch. I have meetings, but I've cleared my schedule for tomorrow afternoon if that works for a visit. 4 o'clock, Iris said. After Lumi's done with school. 4 it is. He nodded formally, then hesitated at the doorway. Iris, thank you. For raising such an extraordinary person. I don't deserve any credit, but I am very grateful. After he'd gone, Lumi turned to her mother with uncharacteristic shyness. Is it okay that I want to know him? Iris pulled her daughter into a hug, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. Of course it is. He's your father. And whatever happened between us, he seems to genuinely want to know you. What happened? Lumi asked, pulling back to study her mother's face. The full version, not the hospital condensed one. Iris sighed, glancing at the clock. It was still early, and the doctor had insisted she rest. Let's make some tea, and I'll tell you everything. They settled in the living room, Lumi curled against her mother's side like she used to when she was younger. Outside, the afternoon sunlight filtered through the original stained glass accents of the Victorian windows, casting colorful patterns across the worn carpet. I met your father when I was 26, Iris began. I was head of graphic design at Meridian Solutions, one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the city. I'd worked my way up from junior designer, putting myself through school at night while supporting my mother until she passed. Grandma Elena, Lumi said softly. She'd never met her grandmother, who had died before she was born, but Iris had filled their home with stories and photos. Yes. She would have adored you. Iris smiled sadly. Anyway, the company brought in this brilliant young consultant for a special project, James Thorne. He'd created an algorithm that could analyze user behavior and predict market trends with uncanny accuracy. It was revolutionary, but they needed a complete interface redesign to make it accessible to clients. So you worked together. We were assigned to the same team. I thought he'd be arrogant, these tech geniuses usually were, but he was different. Brilliant, yes, but also genuinely interested in how design could enhance function. He respected my expertise. And you fell in love, Lumi prompted, always eager to move the story along. Not right away. At first, we just worked well together. We'd stay late, ordering takeout and arguing about user experience principles. I thought he was just another privileged tech bro who'd eventually move on to the next big project. What changed? Iris's expression softened with the memory. One night, I was working late, really late, and he came back to the office. He'd forgotten his laptop. He found me crying at my desk. My mother had just been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and the medical bills were overwhelming. I was trying to design a funding campaign to help cover her treatments. What did he do? He sat with me all night, helping me design the perfect fundraising page. He didn't try to throw money at the problem or offer empty sympathies. He just helped. Practical, present help. By morning, we had a campaign that ended up covering all of my mother's care. Iris paused. That's when I started seeing the real James, beneath the brilliant programmer exterior, and then you fell in love, Lumi concluded, practical as always. Yes, Iris admitted with a small laugh. Then we fell in love. Hard and fast. He was different from anyone I'd ever known, intensely focused but also surprisingly gentle. He saw me not just as a designer or a pretty face, but as a complete person with dreams and struggles and strengths. So what went wrong? His family. Iris's voice hardened slightly. Specifically, his father, Walter Thorne. Old money, old views, and absolutely opposed to his brilliant heir getting serious about a working-class Latina from the wrong side of town. That's racist and classist, Lumi declared with the righteous indignation of youth. It was both, Iris agreed. But James didn't share those views. He stood up to his father, refused to break things off with me. That's when Walter escalated. The bribe, Lumi recalled from the hospital conversation. Yes. He called me to his office, this imposing space in the Thorne family building downtown. He made it very clear that his son's future was too important to be derailed by an inappropriate attachment. Then he wrote out a check for $250,000. And you tore it up, Lumi said with satisfaction. Into tiny pieces, right in front of him. I told him his son wasn't a commodity to be bought and protected, and I wasn't a problem to be paid off. Iris smiled wryly. I was very dramatic about it. Very righteous. Good for you. Maybe. But Walter Thorne wasn't used to being defied. I didn't realize then how far he would go to separate us. Iris's expression darkened. A week later, James had to travel to Singapore for the final venture capital negotiations. His algorithm was about to be licensed to major financial institutions worldwide. It was his breakthrough moment. And he left you behind? Lumi frowned. He asked me to join him once the initial meetings were done. He promised to send a ticket, to call every day. And I believed him. Iris sighed. But no ticket ever came. No calls. After 2 weeks, I was frantic. I tried calling his hotel in Singapore, but they claimed to have no record of him. I called his personal number, but it had been disconnected. His father intercepted everything, Lumi guessed, her analytical mind piecing together the story. Yes, though I didn't know that then. I thought James had changed his mind, decided his career was more important than our relationship. I was devastated. Iris paused. And then I discovered I was pregnant with you. Did you try to tell him? I went to his family's company headquarters, but security wouldn't let me past the lobby. I wrote letters that were never answered. And then one day, outside my doctor's office, I noticed a man taking photos of me. When I confronted him, he drove away quickly, but not before I saw the Thorn Industries parking permit on his windshield. They were spying on you. Lumi's eyes widened. Monitoring me. Making sure I wasn't causing problems for the Thorn family image. That's when I realized how powerful they really were and how far they might go to keep James and me apart. Iris hugged Lumi closer. I was terrified, honestly. Here I was, pregnant, alone, being followed by private investigators hired by one of the wealthiest families in the city. So I disappeared. You ran. I changed my number, moved across town, took freelance work instead of another corporate position. I cut ties with everyone who might connect me to James. I was protecting you, or at least I thought I was. Lumi was quiet for a moment, processing this new understanding of her origins. Do you think he really tried to find you? Now. Yes, I believe he did. But back then, I convinced myself he was part of it, that he decided his family fortune was more important than some designer he'd had a fling with. Iris's voice caught. It was easier to be angry than heartbroken. But he became super successful without his family's help. Thorntech is huge. We studied his algorithm in my advanced computing class. They didn't mention it was his, but I recognize the name now. Yes. He built his own empire, separate from the Thorn family business. I followed his career from afar. Each new achievement, each magazine cover. I told myself I'd made the right choice, that a man so focused on success would never have had time for a family anyway. But you never tried to contact him once he was successful on his own. Once he wasn't under his father's control anymore. Iris looked away. Pride. Hurt. Fear that he'd reject you, reject us. Take your pick. I had 1,000 justifications. And as the years passed, it got harder to imagine how I'd even start that conversation. Until I accidentally called him during an emergency. Lumi shook her head in disbelief. That's some serious cosmic intervention. The universe does have a strange sense of timing, Iris agreed. Though I'm still not convinced it's kind timing. What do you mean? Your father is a billionaire, Lumi. A public figure. His life is nothing like ours. I'm worried that once the novelty wears off, he'll realize we don't fit into his world. And you'll be hurt. Or maybe he'll realize what he's been missing, Lumi countered. Did you see his face when he looked at me? He wants to know me, Mom. I know he does. And you deserve to know him. Iris brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's face so like James's in texture and color. Just, keep your expectations realistic, okay? People with his kind of wealth and power live differently. Their priorities, their perspectives, it's another world. I know, Lumi said seriously. But he seems real. Not like those fake rich people on TV. Despite her concerns, Iris had to smile at her daughter's assessment. James had always been genuine, it was what had drawn her to him in the first place. His brilliance came with a refreshing lack of pretension, a quality that had apparently survived his rise to wealth and power. Just promise me one thing, Iris said. What? If anything about this situation ever makes you uncomfortable, if you ever feel pressured or overwhelmed, you'll tell me immediately. Your well-being comes first. Always. I promise. Lumi nestled closer. But I think it's going to be okay. Maybe even better than okay. As they sat together in their worn but comfortable living room, Iris hoped her daughter was right. Perhaps the universe's cruel sense of humor would turn out to be a blessing in disguise. Perhaps James Thorne's unexpected return to their lives would bring more good than harm. But as she glanced around their modest home, thinking of James's corporate empire and the vastly different worlds they inhabited, she couldn't quite silence the voice of doubt. 12 years was a long time. People changed. Priorities shifted. and the gap between their lives had grown from a crack to a canyon. Only time would tell if that canyon could be bridged or if trying would only lead to another, more painful fall. That if you've ever had your past unexpectedly collide with your present, hit the like button right now. And if you're wondering whether James Thorne's return will heal old wounds or create new ones, subscribe to Mr. Arden's Heart Stories to find out what happens next in this emotional journey of reconciliation, forgiveness, and second chances that arrive when we least expect them. The following weeks unfolded in a delicate dance of boundaries and bridge building. James moved cautiously, respecting Iris's fierce independence while gently insisting on his right to support Lumi. He arranged for the hospital bills to be covered and negotiated extensions with Iris's clients that gave her the breathing room to truly recover. For Lumi, whose world had expanded overnight to include a father, and not just any father, but one whose technology company made the very devices she coded on, the adjustment was both thrilling and disorienting. "What's it like?" her best friend Zoe asked during lunch at school, voice hushed with awe. "Finding out your dad is basically Tony Stark." Lumi poked at her sandu. "Itch, considering. Weird. Like, he wants to know everything about me all at once. Yesterday he asked about my favorite books and what sports I play and if I'd rather go to space or underwater exploration. It's exhausting. But he's a billionaire," Zoe pressed, as though Lumi might have somehow missed this critical detail. "Does he have a mansion? A private jet? Are you moving to a compound with robot butlers?" "We're not moving anywhere," Lumi said firmly, thinking of her mother's fierce declaration of independence. "And he's not like that. He wears normal clothes that are expensive, but normal. And he seems nervous around me. Like he's afraid of saying the wrong thing." "He probably is," Zoe said with unexpected insight. "My dad gets like that when he visits after business trips. Says he feels like he has to earn his place back." That afternoon, when Lumi returned home from school, she found her mother at the kitchen table, surrounded by freelance design projects, a good sign that Iris was feeling stronger. But the tension in her shoulders told a different story. "Is everything okay?" Lumi asked, dropping her backpack by the door. Iris looked up, forcing a smile. "Just catching up on work." "How was school?" "Fine. Mrs. Chen says I can move up to the advanced programming module if I finish the current one by Friday." Lumi hesitated. "Is Dad still coming over today?" The word dad still felt strange on her tongue, new and untested. Iris's expression flickered at the term, but she nodded. "At 4. He said he's bringing something for you. A gift of some kind." "Cool." Lumi tried to sound casual, though excitement bubbled beneath her practiced nonchalance. "Are you okay with that? With him bringing me stuff?" Iris set down her stylus, giving her daughter her full attention. "As long as it's reasonable, yes. You're allowed to accept gifts from your father, Lumi. I don't want you caught in the middle of our complicated situation." "Your complicated situation that created me," Lumi pointed out with a wry smile. Despite her tension, Iris laughed. "Yes, well, that's one result I'll never regret, no matter how complicated things got." The doorbell rang precisely at 4, James's punctuality another trait Lumi had apparently inherited. He stood on their porch holding a sleek rectangular package and something that looked suspiciously like architectural blueprints. "Sorry about the papers," he said as Lumi let him in. "The contractor sent over the weatherization plans for your mother to approve." "Is that what they are?" Iris appeared in the hallway, eyeing the rolls of paper. "They look excessive for some weather stripping and insulation." James's expression remained carefully neutral. "The contractors found some issues that need addressing before the weather turns. Nothing structural, but the heating system needs updating and there's significant air leakage around the original window frames." Iris crossed her arms. "We agreed on basic weatherization, James. Not a full renovation. Perhaps we should review what they found," he suggested diplomatically. "After I give Lumi her gift." The mention of a present instantly diverted Lumi's attention from the brewing disagreement. "What is it?" James handed her the package with a mixture of hope and nervousness that made him seem suddenly younger, less imposing. It's not the newest model. I didn't want to presume too much, but I thought it might help with your programming projects. Lumi tore open the packaging to reveal a high-end laptop, sleek, powerful, and worth more than anything she'd ever owned. Her eyes widened. This is a Thorntech Pro developer, she breathed, running her fingers over the logo. We talked about these in the computer club. They're used by professional developers. It has a neural engine optimization core and expanded RAM capacity for machine learning applications, James finished, a genuine smile lighting his features. I thought it might be useful for that music pattern recognition algorithm you were telling me about. Lumi looked up at him, momentarily speechless. Not only had he remembered her project, but he'd understood exactly what tools she needed. Thank you, she finally managed. It's perfect. Iris watched the exchange with complicated emotions playing across her face. She recognized the significance of the gift, not just its monetary value, but the validation it represented. James wasn't merely throwing expensive presents at his newly discovered daughter, he was acknowledging her intelligence, her passions, her potential. That was thoughtful, she admitted as Lumi rushed to set up the new laptop at the kitchen table. Though perhaps we should discuss gift parameters going forward. Of course, James agreed, still watching Lumi with undisguised wonder. I don't want to overstep that. He held up the blueprints. Which brings us to these. May I show you what the contractor found? They spread the plans across the living room coffee table. What Iris had expected to be simple weatherization notes turned out to be a comprehensive assessment of the Victorians' inefficiencies. Ancient single-pane windows that leaked heat, outdated knob and tube wiring that posed fire hazards, a heating system functioning at less than 60% capacity. This is far beyond what we discussed, Iris said, though her voice lacked its earlier edge. The report was concerning, especially the electrical issues. I know, James acknowledged. And I wouldn't suggest addressing all of it if it weren't for safety concerns. The electrical system in particular needs immediate attention. Our landlord should be handling this, Iris said, frustration evident. We've reported issues repeatedly. Have you considered that might be why the rent is relatively affordable for this neighborhood? Because the owner doesn't want to invest in proper maintenance? Iris had no answer for that. The Victorians' below-market rent had been the only reason they could afford to move to a better school district for Lumi. James hesitated, then continued carefully. I've looked into the property ownership. The house is held by a real estate investment trust that owns dozens of similar properties across the city. They deliberately keep them in a minimum habitable condition to maximize profit margins. You investigated our landlord? Iris asked, caught between irritation at his presumption and grudging appreciation for his thoroughness. I investigated the safety of my daughter's home, he corrected gently. And found it concerning. The simple statement disarmed her anger. Whatever their complicated past, James's concern for Lumi was genuine. We can't afford to move again, she said after a moment. And even if the landlord agreed to repairs, they'd raise the rent beyond what we can manage. James nodded, unsurprised. I anticipated that might be the case. I'd like to propose an alternative. He pulled out another document from his portfolio. The trust that owns this property is looking to divest some of their holdings. This house is on their potential sale list. Iris's eyes narrowed. James, if you're suggesting, I'm suggesting that a blind trust purchase the property and lease it back to you at your current rate. The trust would handle all necessary repairs and maintenance. He held up a hand as she started to object. Before you refuse, please hear me out. Lumi appeared in the doorway, drawn by the serious tone of their conversation. Are we moving? She asked, her expression falling. I just made friends at the new school. No, honey, Iris assured her. We're discussing some repairs the house needs. The house is in pretty bad shape, James explained to Lumi. I'm trying to convince your mother to let me help fix the issues. But Mom's worried about accepting too much help because it makes her feel like she's not independent, Lumi summarized with characteristic directness. James looked at Iris, who had the grace to appear slightly abashed at having her position so accurately distilled by a 12-year-old. "That's not inaccurate," she admitted. "Here's what I propose," James said, addressing both of them. "The trust purchases the house. You continue paying your current rent, but to the trust instead of the negligent landlord. The necessary safety repairs get done immediately. No one moves, no one's pride gets irreparably damaged, and most importantly, no one freezes or faces electrical fires this winter." "And who controls this mysterious trust?" Iris asked, though she already knew the answer. "Technically, a financial manager. But yes, I would fund it." James met her eyes directly. "It's not charity, Iris. It's me taking responsibility for my daughter's well-being in the only way you'll currently allow." The room fell silent as Iris weighed her options. Her fierce independence warred with practical concerns for Lumi's safety and comfort. The electrical issues especially worried her. She'd smelled burning near some of the outlets last winter when they ran space heaters. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "But I need to see exactly what this arrangement would entail. In writing." "I'll have the papers drawn up tomorrow," James agreed, relief evident in his voice. "And I want a clause that gives us the option to purchase the house ourselves someday," she added. "At fair market value." James's expression softened. "Absolutely. I'd expect nothing less. If you've ever found yourself torn between accepting help and protecting your independence, comment pride versus need below. And if you know the challenge of creating new family dynamics where none existed before, tap that like button right now. For Lumi, the next few weeks brought transformations both subtle and profound. The ancient heating system in their Victorian era was replaced with efficient modern ductwork. The dangerous knob and tube wiring gave way to safe electrical systems. The drafty windows were restored rather than replaced, preserving the home's historic character while dramatically improving its efficiency. But more significant than these physical changes was the evolving relationship with her newfound father. 3 afternoons a week, James would arrive after school, often working remotely from their dining room table while Lumi completed homework or coding projects. They developed a comfortable rhythm, a gradual accumulation of shared moments that began to form the foundation of a real relationship. "This loop structure is inefficient," James noted one afternoon, peering over her shoulder at the algorithm she was developing. "Have you considered a recursive function instead?" Lumi frowned at her screen. "But then I'd need to rewrite half the program." "Sometimes a complete redesign is more efficient than patching an existing system," he observed, pulling up a chair beside her. "Let me show you." From the kitchen where she was preparing dinner, Iris watched them huddle over the laptop, their dark heads bent together in identical postures of concentration. They even frowned the same way, brows furrowed, a slight tilt to the head as they processed complex problems. The sight brought an unexpected lump to her throat. For 12 years, she'd been Lumi's everything: mother, teacher, provider, protector. Watching her daughter connect so naturally with James stirred complicated emotions: joy that Lumi had found this missing piece of herself, fear that she might be somehow diminished in her daughter's life, and a wistful sadness for all the years that James had missed. "Mom!" Lumi called excitedly. "Dad showed me how to optimize the algorithm. It's running 40% faster now." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Iris replied, forcing brightness into her voice. "Dinner in 10 minutes, okay?" James looked up, catching Iris's expression before she could mask it. A silent understanding passed between them, an acknowledgement of the complex emotional territory they were all navigating. "I should get going," he said, standing. "I have a video call with the Singapore office at 8. "You could stay for dinner," Lumi suggested. "Mom made enough for an army. She always does." James glanced at Iris, seeking permission. These small courtesies, his careful respect for her boundaries, his refusal to assume privileges he hadn't earned, were gradually softening her defenses. "There's plenty," she confirmed with a small nod. That evening marked a subtle shift in their delicate new normal. Seated around their kitchen table, they almost resembled a traditional family sharing a meal, discussing their days, planning for Lumi's upcoming science fair project. When James helped with dishes afterward, standing shoulder to shoulder with Iris at the sink, the domesticity of the moment struck them both simultaneously. "This is strange, isn't it?" Iris said quietly, passing him a plate to dry. "Unexpectedly not strange," he replied. "That's what's strangest of all." She laughed softly, the sound warming the space between them. 12 years ago, if someone had told me we'd be washing dishes together in a Victorian with our preteen daughter coding in the next room, I'd have believed the daughter part, James said, his voice dropping to ensure Lumi couldn't hear from the living room. "I always thought we'd have a family someday." The simple admission hung in the air between them, a glimpse of the future they might have shared if circumstances and Walter Thorne hadn't intervened. "James," Iris began hesitantly, "about your father." His expression closed slightly. "What about him? Does he know about Lumi?" James set down the dish towel, his movements deliberate. "No. And I'd prefer to keep it that way for now. He's going to find out eventually. Especially if you're spending significant time here." "I'm aware." His jaw tightened. "But Walter Thorne lost the right to know my daughter when he deliberately separated me from her mother. When he ensured I missed the first 12 years of her life." The vehemence in his voice surprised Iris. The James she'd known had been disappointed in his father's attitudes but never openly antagonistic. "What happened between you two?" she asked. James looked toward the living room where Lumi sat with her laptop, then back to Iris. "After Singapore, after you disappeared, I confronted him about the things he'd done to separate us. He didn't deny it. He was proud of it." A muscle worked in his jaw. "He said he'd protected the Thorne legacy from an unfortunate entanglement." "That sounds like Walter," Iris said bitterly. "I walked away from Thorne Industries that day. Used the patents from my algorithm to start Thorntech as a direct competitor. He called it my tantrum phase and predicted I'd be crawling back within a year. A grim satisfaction crossed James's features. 8 years later, Thorntech's market cap exceeded Thorne Industries for the first time. He called me the same day, suggested we consolidate family resources. And you told him that I'd rather burn my company to the ground than let him touch a single share." James's smile was sharp. "We haven't spoken since, except through lawyers." Iris studied him, seeing new dimensions to the man before her. The James she'd known had been brilliant but somewhat conflict-averse, especially regarding his domineering father. This James, hardened by success, betrayal, and regret, was a different creature entirely. "He'll come after us when he finds out," she warned quietly. "He tried to erase me from your life once. He won't hesitate to try again." "Let him try," James said with quiet confidence. "I'm not a naive programmer anymore, Iris. I've spent 12 years building protections against exactly this scenario. I just didn't know what I was protecting until now." Their conversation was interrupted by Lumi's excited voice from the living room. "Mom! Dad! Come see this. My algorithm just composed its first complete melody." The shared parental summons drew them both to the living room, the serious discussion temporarily shelved. But as they watched Lumi proudly demonstrate her creation of an AI that analyzed emotional patterns in classical compositions and generated new music with similar emotional resonance, Iris couldn't shake the foreboding that Walter Thorne would soon cast his shadow over their tentatively rebuilding family. She'd torn up his check once before. She disappeared to protect her child from his influence. But now, with James back in their lives, bringing both his resources and his father's enmity, she wondered if they were strong enough to withstand what might be coming. As October gave way to November, the improvements to the Victorian were completed just as the first cold snap hit the city. Lumi marveled at the difference in warm air flowing evenly throughout the house, no more wearing 3 layers indoors, no more worrying about overloading circuits with space heaters. "It's weird not seeing my breath in the bathroom in the morning," she commented one Saturday as they prepared breakfast. "Weird but nice." Iris smiled, flipping pancakes at the stove. We've moved up in the world. Indoor plumbing and heating were practically royalty now. Their easy banter was interrupted by Lumi's phone chiming with a text message. Her expression brightened as she read it. "Dad's coming over early. He wants to take us somewhere. He says it's a surprise." Iris raised an eyebrow. "A surprise?" "He says to dress casually but warm." Lumi was already halfway to her room. "Can we go? Please?" Looking at her daughter's excited face, Iris found it impossible to refuse. "I suppose. But I need to know where we're going before we get in the car." James arrived 30 minutes later in a practical SUV rather than the sleek sports car Lumi had half expected a billionaire to drive. He seemed nervous, fidgeting slightly as they gathered their coats. "So, where's this mysterious destination?" Iris asked, wrapping a scarf around her neck. "Westlake Academy," he replied, watching her reaction carefully. "They're hosting an open house for their advanced STEM program today. I thought Lumi might want to see the facilities." Iris stiffened slightly. Westlake Academy was the most prestigious private school in the city with a tuition to match. She'd researched it wistfully when Lumi was younger, before filing it under impossible dreams. Westlake. Lumi's eyes widened. "The one with the research-grade labs and the robotics program that wins nationals every year?" "The very same," James confirmed. "No pressure, no expectations. Just a chance to see what they offer. The winter application deadline is still a month away if you're interested. Westlake costs $40,000 a year," Iris said quietly, her voice carefully neutral. "I'm aware," James replied, matching her tone. "And I've already established an educational trust for Lumi that would cover tuition through college, regardless of what happens between us." That he turned to Lumi. "But that's getting ahead of ourselves. First, let's just visit and see if you even like the place." The drive to Westlake was filled with Lumi's excited questions about the school's programs. James answered each one with careful detail, clearly having researched extensively. Iris remained largely silent, watching the comfortable rapport developing between father and daughter with a mixture of joy and apprehension. Westlake Academy occupied a sprawling campus that resembled a small liberal arts college more than a K-12 school. Modern glass buildings intermingled with historic brick structures, connected by tree-lined pathways where students moved between classes. "The middle school and high school are technically separate programs," James explained as they parked, "but they share facilities and faculty. The STEM track allows advanced students to progress at their own pace rather than being restricted by grade level." They were met at the administration building by a poised woman in her 50s who introduced herself as Dr. Eleanor Chen, head of admissions. "Mr. Thorne, wonderful to see you again," she greeted James warmly. "And this must be Lumi. We've heard remarkable things about your coding projects." Lumi looked surprised. "You have? Your father shared some of you."